Hey guys, MC Stu here, and today we are going to look at my top 5 cStore ships for 2022. Big shout out to all the channel members. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody that subs to the channel and watches the videos, hits the thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. First up, we have the Clarke Multi-Mission Command Cruiser. So I flew this ship extensively for the past 6-7 months or so as my main DPS torpedo build platform. It excels at torpedo kinetic builds, but can be used in a couple of other roles. Let's take a look at the stats here. So this is a cStore ship, obviously, cruiser, multi-mission. It has a hull modifier or hit points of 56,250, hull modifier of 1.25, shield modifier of 1.1, turn rate of 9.5, impulse modifier of 0.16, and an inertia of 35. Now, for me, the only things that really kind of matter at the end of the day, because when you build it, you can kind of build in and out these kinds of things. So whether a ship is slow or has a low impulse modifier or whatever doesn't really matter in terms of how you go about building that ship, how you fly it, and the bridge officer abilities. One of the big things, though, that is hard to deal with depending on how you build it more than anything else is the inertia rating, so how much slide you're going to get. So those are the base stats on it. The bridge officer seating, we're going to get a lieutenant tactical. We're going to get an engineering commander command. We are going to get an ensign engineering, a science lieutenant commander, and then we're going to get a universal lieutenant commander seat. So there's quite a bit of flexibility here in this ship. So as I said, doing Torp build in the front, mines in the back, it definitely excels with that, having the commander command seating. So you can have a concentrated firepower, you can have call artillery barrage. It does very, very well. I was able to scratch 2 million DPS in a supported run in this ship, and others have done even higher in this particular ship. For the layout on the consoles, we have 3 tactical, 4 engineering, and we have 3 science. And this ship can be bought for the standard 3000 Zen in the zStore. Now, one thing to note, and I'll have the next video we'll have coming out is going to discuss this, but this ship has a fleet variant. So the fleet variant is going to give us an additional, I believe, engineering slot, and then you can X upgrade it. So you can end up with a total of 12 console slots instead of this stock 10 that would come on it. So just by getting the fleet variant of this, you would get that one extra, and then an X upgrade would bump that up even more. So this is going to come with a console called the Genesis Seed, and let's scroll down and take a look at that. So the Genesis Seed is a clicky that is going to do a good amount of damage, again, depending on how you build this. So we'll use this in support, or it's very good in science kind of builds where you're able to suck everything in and then drop the Genesis Seed, and it does a tremendous amount of damage to up to 10 foes within 5 kilometers. And if you are using this in conjunction, say, with like the Agony Redistributor console from the Terran Defiant, you can really stack these abilities up and do some amazing damage with it. But they are situational. So generally I'm going to use this console on a science build, or I am going to use it in a supporting kind of role to control and destroy adds that would come in, clearing the field for the main DPS or taking on the main targets. So console's very good, but is situational. Now the ship also does have a hangar bay, and it's going to just come basically with some standard fighters. I would definitely change these out for others. What other ones? That's really going to depend on what your needs are for what you're running. So overall, ship is a great value, I think. It's versatile in that you can do, obviously, the torpedo build is where it really shines. It does have attract I'm sorry, yeah, tracked fire. So you can, does it have a tracked fire? It does not. So you could do a tank with this, but it would be more of a suppression tank. It's not going to be a threat heavy tank because it doesn't have a tracked fire. You can use threatening stance on it and run miracle worker, and then run suppression barrage on it, and this would work well as a tank. In order to keep outgoing damage. And you could probably hold threat depending on how you build it, but this would, again, be a pretty situational kind of a tank. More so if you were doing organized runs. For doing pugs or even just competitive runs, a threat tank would probably be better, but that is something that you could play around with and do pretty well with, depending on the overall environment that you're operating in. Lastly, you could easily do a beam build on this. Broadside would work fine. Cannons, maybe not so much, only because you wouldn't, well, I guess you could put an Omni in the back. So you could do any of those other kinds of builds, basically just not science, and it would do pretty good. The energy weapons build would do really well, depending on your build. Tank would be okay, but situational. Torpedo main build would just excel. This ship is built for a kinetic torpedo build. It's one of the only ones in the cStore that you can get that has a commander command specialization seating and will allow you to fully maximize a torpedo build. So this is my fleet variant, just so we can take a quick look. Have the Section 31 shield on it, and I have it kit bashed a little bit. I think it looks kind of cool. Let's just take a quick, this isn't going to be a build video, but let's just take a quick look at the build just so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing with it. So all Torps in the front, mine's in the back. This is an expensive build. It has a lot of, high-end expensive traits and those kinds of things, but you could still put together something budget. I've put together a budget torpedo build on my free-to-play account. And when I say budget, it took me time grinding, doing the events, but it didn't cost me any money. No real-life money was spent on it. And in an organized run, I'm doing well over 1 million DPS. And on pug runs, I'm scratching the 300K range. And that's on a completely free-to-play build. So this ship will do very well for you as long as you're building it right, regardless of whether or not you have a bunch of paid stuff or not. This is what I'm running. This is the fleet variant. So this is the Fleet Malachowski Multi-Mission Command Cruiser. If you purchase the cStore version, you can get the fleet version for 1 fleet module. If you don't want to pay for the money for that, because the trait that comes on this, I didn't talk about it because it's not anything super special. This is more about the overall platform and the use cases for these platforms. But so on a ship like this, you could skip buying the cStore version and you could use the fleet modules you can get from your reputation at tier 6 in those, and you could just buy the ship from the ship vendor for 5 fleet modules and get this exact same ship that I have with spending 0 money. So again, overall, I think this is a good value, regardless of which direction you go. The other thing to note is that, if you get the Fleet Store or if you get the cStore version of it, then you'll be able to reclaim this on any of your characters and pick it up for just the 1 fleet module. If you buy the fleet version by itself with just the modules, you'll have to do that on every character that you want to use this on. But those are the 2 options to go about getting a hold of this ship. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at number 2. All right, next up we have the Terran Trailblazer Science Warship. I was a little skeptical. This didn't jump out at me when we were looking at this bundle when it came out last month, but I've been using this as my main now since that bundle has come out on my torpedo builds, and it has done very, very well. It's a pretty versatile ship as well. Since it is a science ship, you could go full science, EPG, or control on it. You could pretty much put an energy weapons build on pretty much anything. So I keep mentioning that on these ships, and like the last one, you can put it on anything, you can build it to do pretty good. And there's some things that will make an energy weapon build very, very good, which this ship doesn't have. Some of the ships that are coming up in the list will, and we'll go into that once we get to those. But this ship has just performed amazing for me in using the Torp meta. I've played with it a little bit on my science character, and it does very, very well there as well. Let's take a look at the stats on this. So this is going to have base hit points of 51,750, hull modifier of 1.15, shield modifier of 1.3, turn rate of 12, impulse modifier of 0.1, 0.18 and an inertia rating of 50. So this thing does not slide around a lot. It is fairly quick. It's a little bit slower than the Janeway, which I actually like. The Janeway I flew very extensively last year for quite a while until some of these other ships started coming out. The Janeway is also a promo ship, so it's a lot more expensive to get. But this handles much, much better. And I think it's a little more versatile than the Janeway. And we'll talk about that comparison here in just a moment. So let's take a look at the bridge officer seating. So this is going to have a Lieutenant Commander Tactical. Next, it's going to have a Lieutenant Tactical Miracle Worker. And then we're going to have an Engineering Ensign slot and a Commander Science Command. And then we have a Universal Lieutenant Commander seat. So the way that this is laid out, you have a little bit more of choices in the seating over the Janeway. The other thing where this does a little bit better is you have an extra weapon slot in the back, so you can equip an extra mind over the Janeway if you're doing a Torp build. Or if you're using this as a science build, which it'll do very well in that since it has the secondary deflector, you could have more choices at putting set bonuses and things like that. They're going to help EPG control or damage over time. This ship can also equip dual heavy cannons, or dual cannons and dual heavy cannons. As stated, it also has a secondary deflector. So you could put a cannon build on this. You could do a very, very good science build, and you could do a very, very good meta torpedo build. The consoles that this comes with, or slots that it comes with, is going to be 4 tactical, 2 engineering, and 5 science. There's not a fleet variant of this, so it's going to come stock here with 11 of these console slots. This ship came out in the anniversary bundle, but it can be purchased separately, or if you have one of the tier 6 coupons still, you can use that on these new ships and buy them individually, which is really nice. That was something that we haven't seen a lot of in the past, where you could buy bundled ships individually like this, especially for like an anniversary pack. Now, this ship also has built into it an Agony Phaser Spiral Lance. So this is a large cannon that's is it underneath on this one? I think it depends on how you kit bash it, but innately in the ship, it has a clicky that's built into it that will fire this big blast of Agony Phaser damage out, and does pretty good. I mean, depending on how you build it, it can do better. But even if you don't build around that whatsoever, like on a Torp build, it's a free clicky that gets you extra damage, regardless of how you build the ship. It's just built into it. So that's very nice. That it has that ability in it. Prior to this, only the Enterprise, the Dreadnought, or the future version, I can't remember what it's called, had this, and then also I believe the Terran version of it had it as well. I know the one that just came out in the pack had this lance built into it. So pretty cool that has that built into it. Let's go ahead and scroll down. So again, there is no fleet version on it. Again, the trait on it's kind of meh. Not something I'm really using. Again, these ships are really more about the platform use case as opposed to just overall usability, including the trait. I do have a video where I go over cStore ships that are good and must have traits, so kind of balancing those two aspects. But there's a lot of ships in the game where like the trait's total garbage, and but the ship itself is just amazing, right? And so sometimes, you know, you're buying something. We do this a lot where we'll buy a ship for the trait and then never fly it, or for the console, which is kind of a shame. So I thought, you know, in this video, we would kind of go the other direction. Let's look at ships that we'll actually buy and fly. So I won't be emphasizing the traits that are on any of these, because most of the ones in this list are not super great. All right, so next we have the console that comes with this, and if I'm being honest, I don't think I've used it at all. Let's just take a look at it here. So this is going to give us 12% critical severity scales with Starship Exotic Generation, so this would be pretty decent on a science build. 15% shield capacity, so a little bit extra survivability. So we can summon drones with this. It creates Rampart deflector drone, or deflection drones, for up to 10 seconds, immune to all damage while drones are active. Sounds like this might be maybe decent for PvP. Drones may be targeted or destroyed. If destroyed before 10 seconds, cooldown partially reduced. So this looks like this would be pretty good for PvP. At least the clicky part of it and the passive parts would be decent for Psi builds, EPG builds, depending on what you have available to you. So there's some things where it's like, yeah, this would be good for that, but you might have things that are better and it's not worth running it. I'm not saying that's the case. You'll just need to look at what you have. Let's take a look at the ship itself. So I got that section 31 on again. I really love this thing. And I have it kind of kit bashed, so it looks kind of funky, but this one doesn't actually show the lance. I'm just going to imagine that's this big hole here in the front. So have it kit bashed. The way I have this built, again, is a torpedo build similar to what we had on the Malachowski prior to this. So less one mine, a little bit more on the tactical end. We do have it X upgraded, and this ship has done very, very well for me. I think the top score I've got on this is 2.1 million DPS on an organized run. And I know most people don't have access to organized runs and those kinds of things, but the reason I keep referencing it is because it's that indicator of kind of that min-max side of it. And so if you don't have access to that, you don't have all of these things, it's still a good ship that will perform very well regardless of the level of gear and those kinds of things that you have, as long as you follow the basic rules, you know, to putting things together. All right, so overall, this is a great value. It's an excellent platform, fairly versatile. You can do more than just one thing with it. Science, you can do the torpedo stuff, and as most things, as I said before, energy weapon builds, not a problem. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Next, we have the Titan Science Destroyer. I love this ship. I think this is one of the best ships in the game in terms of use case, usability, and diversity in the way that you can build this out for the different roles. As always, I'm currently running, at least on this particular character, I'll show you in a moment, a torpedo build on it, but I'm running this on my science character as their main Psi build right now, and I'm also using this on a support character that runs support for, I can do support mainly for kinetic builds on this. You can also do, control support and a couple other variants depending on what the team needs. This ship it just can do it all. It doesn't break any records on any of them, but it does all of these different roles I'm going to go over very, very well. Let's look at the base stats. So we have a hull of 49,500, hull modifier of 1.1, shield modifier of 1.325, and a turn rate of 13, impulse modifier of 0.15, and an inertia rating of 55. So the ship handles very, very well. For the seating, we have a Lieutenant Commander Tactical, we have an Ensign Tactical, we have a Lieutenant Engineering, we have a Commander Science, and we have a Lieutenant Commander Science Command Seat. And so there's some interesting things on this ship. So the way they have this laid out is kind of interesting. Why don't we actually jump over to the ship itself so we can take a look at this. So this ship has modes, and this is where it's really kind of cool. So let's say you were going to do a torpedo build, or a tactical DPS heavy build, whatever it may be that you want to put together on it. But let's say it's DPS tactical. If we look at the seating here, the wiki doesn't talk about this because I don't think this is kind of a newer kind of thing, I don't think it has the icons for it, but you'll see it has a tactical commander seat and it has a science commander seat. So it has both, which is not something you normally will see on a ship. Now, if we take a look down here at my abilities, the mine dispersion pattern, and actually I don't think I'm going to be able to activate any of these because I'm in a social zone here, but essentially we have two different modes. So we have tactical mode, which if I click that, you'll see the top goes red, and now I can use the mine dispersion pattern. Or if I were to switch back to science mode, now I can use the Gravity Well 3, which is a commander rank ability. So on my science character, when I go into a map, I leave it in science mode because I want to be able to use the commander seat in the highest science ability that I have. If I'm running tactical, I'm going to, when I go into a map, switch it to tactical mode. The little top turns red, and I'm now able to utilize the commander tactical seat. So you can gear the ship. Now, there's some people that they get real complicated and they build it in a way to where they'll actually toggle between the two. You have a little bit of a cooldown when you switch. So if I go to tactical mode, I can immediately switch back to science. But then I'm going to have a little bit of a cooldown in between that. So you'd have to, pay attention to that. And is this giving me, it doesn't have a cooldown on it when it clicks. So you got a 30-second once you go back. So there's some people that'll kind of switch back and forth. So sometimes what I'll do is if I, maybe I'm doing a pug run and I'm using torpedoes and I want to be able to group everybody up, I'll have it in science, or I'll put it in tactical, get out a bunch of mines, and then I'll put it in science mode, use my gravity well 3, and then transport all my mines to that location. So there's a use case for toggling, but I generally, so I don't have to try and mess with that because a lot of times fights can be dynamic and you don't know when you're going to need to switch back and forth. And with the cooldown, I generally, like on my science build, I leave it on science. On my tactical, I'm going to leave it on tactical. But it gives us the ability to build in both directions on this ship, and it gives us that versatility to change from one mode to another, which is really, really cool that it does that. On top of that, I think this ship is beautiful. I think it's one of the best looking ships in the game. There is another skin or two for it, and all the other ones, well, I won't say all the other ones, but the ones that came out with the ship look just amazing. Some of the older ones look kind of weird, but it's a very good looking ship. I really, really like this thing. Let's jump back over to the wiki on it and we'll finish looking at it. So it's, as you can see, it is a 4.3. I should also mention it has a experimental weapon on it, and that experimental weapon only will be used while you're in tactical mode. So when you're in science mode, that will not work. The secondary deflector, though, I believe does proc regardless. And just so I'm not losing my mind here, yes, so it has a secondary deflector. So the secondary deflector will work regardless of whether or not you're in tactical mode or not. So that's kind of a nice little feature in tactical mode. You can kind of get both of those, and depending on, again, how you build it, you can get even more out of it. All right, let's go ahead and move down. So we have 4 tactical, 2 engineering, and 4 science. Now, again, that adds up to 10. So as you guessed, there is a fleet variant of it, which is what we were looking at for the one that I'm running in game there. The trait, again, on this, nothing super great. I don't use it really for anything. While it's trait slotted, when you activate engineering, science, or tactical fleet, a ship of your faction, flagship class, will warp in and assist you in combat for 90 seconds. So if you're doing, a carrier pet build and you're trying to get every single piece of carrier or pets in that you can, that might be something you want to use. Let's take a look at the console. The console is something we've used and we're kind of moving away from, but it's still pretty good. But you have to have either a little bit of drain or be debuffing your target. So the passives on it are going to be, where'd it go? Are going to be decent for science, obviously, your EPG, and then Starship Weapon Stabilization. So this is going to increase your critical hit chance for your weapons. What we use it quite a bit for is the opening salvo. And so firing 4 opening salvos, okay, hits target, kinetic damage. This is the part that is nice here. So it will knock the enemy's weapon or shields offline. And I think that varies depending on if you're in it does vary if you're in tactical mode or science mode. So in science mode, it'll knock the shields offline. In tactical mode, I think it knocks the weapons offline, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And the wiki doesn't really give us both of those. We can take a look and see if I have it equipped. This is going to be based on how long it stays offline. It's going to be based on your drain rating. But we use it a lot on like Borg tactical cubes, and even with a super high drain rating, there's enemies in the game that can basically, repair themselves faster than what that timer is listed. We've found that if you're also debuffing the target, damaging the target, then that ability will last at least the amount of time that's listed, or even longer. So this is a good console for, support builds, or even like if I had this ship on my free to play, I would be using this on my main Torp build, especially for pug runs, so I could take down the shields of my enemies fairly quickly. Even if it was for a small period of time, it would still make a really big difference. So it's an interesting console to build around because it has the multiple modes and there's a lot of little nuance to it, which makes it really fun. I mean, it's part of the reason we all play this game and build our ships and watch these videos, right? So it's an interesting console. It has some pretty good use cases, but overall, I think this ship is one of the best values in the game because of the versatility. Jesus, look at these pop-ups. Every time I scroll, it just pops. Because of the versatility and the different modes that you get with this ship, you can just really do so much with it. It's just really, really nice. So let's take a look at this. So on the opening salvo, knock target subsystem offline. So it knocks all the subsystems offline. Okay, so it's not a random subsystem. It does all of them. And then if we go into tactical mode here. Okay, we were in tactical mode. Now we are in science mode. Does it do something different? Knock target subsystems offline. No. Okay. So this does not have modes. It just does the same thing every time, regardless of the mode that you're in. So I'm glad we clarified that. But awesome looking ship. I think it's a great value. If you could only pick a ship or two and you had some of the basic traits you already needed, this platform's great. It'll just give you a lot of versatility so you can have a lot of fun in the game doing different things with not having to have a ton of different ships for it. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. All right, next up we have the Suliban Silik Flight Deck Assault Carrier. So this thing is really, really cool. This has been around for a while. There are a couple different variants of it, depending on your faction. I personally like the way that this one looks. It's kind of looks like Millennium Falcon, maybe? I don't know. What do you guys think? It's a good-looking ship. This is the Romulan variant of it. And it's one of the only Romulan ships that doesn't require a singularity core, which is kind of cool. So let's take a look at the base stats, and then we'll talk about the ship itself. So this has hit points of 58,500, hull modifier of 1.3, shield modifier of 1.0, turn rate of 9, impulse modifier of 0.17, and inertia of 40. So handles pretty decent. Turn rates, whatever. But again, depending on how you build it, that will you can easily fix that. Let's take a look at the seating here. We have a Lieutenant Commander Tactical Command. Next, we're going to have a Lieutenant Tactical Engineering Command. We have Science Ensign, and we have a Universal Lieutenant Commander. So again, pretty flexible seating here. We have 5.3 for the weapons layout. We can equip cannons to this. For the consoles, we have 3 on the tactical, we have 5 on the engineering, and we have 2 on the science. So again, here is a ship with 10 console slots. So there is a fleet variant of this, which I believe gives us another tactical. Yes, it gives us another tactical. And then you can upgrade it to get that 12th universal slot in it. So let's talk about the ship a little bit here. So it's a 5.3, so you can cannon scatter volley. You can only slot scatter volley 2, but it still does very well even at 2. This ship, you can build a tank out of it as it has attract fire, and it has a decent amount of hit points. And again, you can build that to be well over 100. So you have scatter volley, you have dual beam bank build, no problem. You also have torpedo build you can do with this, as it has a commander slot or command seating, but it is only lieutenant command seating. So you're not going to get the full effect in terms of being able, well, you can do you could do concentrated firepower 3, but you could not do call artillery barrage or a higher level, at least of mine dispersal pattern. Dispersion. Yeah, help me out, guys. But you can do a pretty good, decent Torp build on it. Tank, it does pretty good. The cool thing about this is that because it's a flight deck carrier, it has 2 hangar bays. So I get a lot of questions about carrier builds, right? And This is a flight deck carrier. So they changed that a while back. It used to be that flight deck carriers, I think they called them something else. I can't remember what, but they only had one hangar bay. Then they updated them a few years back and made them flight deck carriers and added a hangar bay to them, which to me made your traditional carriers completely obsolete. I mean, it's already hard to build for a carrier because there's not a lot of stuff in the game to boost pets. There's like 2 traits and 1 or 2 personal space traits. There's not much at all in the way of consoles or anything like that that boosts it. I'd really like to see them do, some updates and give some love to carriers or flight deck carriers. But if you're someone that wants to go the carrier route, you want a flight deck carrier. You do not want something that does not have the flight deck in it, because what's going to happen is, yes, you're going to get 2 hangar bays, but you're only going to get 6 weapons. This has 8 weapons like your standard ship. In this particular one, it's a 5.3, which is really cool, and it's going to have the 2 hangar bays. And so, to me, the flight deck carriers basically made your standard carrier completely obsolete. They don't come with secondary deflectors. They're lacking 2 weapons. There's nothing, I don't say there's nothing you can do with it, because you could build it and have fun and it'd still be fine and you get through the content, but it's completely outclassed by your flight deck carriers. So let me know if I'm wrong, guys, what you guys think about that. But I don't see, if you have a choice and you're wanting to do something that's pet heavy carrier kind of style, why would you go with a carrier over a flight deck carrier? I can't think of any one reason whatsoever. I mean, I'm a devil's advocate playing kind of person, and I cannot think of a reason why we want to go that route. So if you are interested in doing carrier play, pets, those kinds of things, flight deck carrier is the way to go. And the Silik is an excellent, excellent ship. Let's go ahead and scroll down here. The trait that comes on it's okay. I use it on my free-to-play. I do have this on my free-to-play. So it affects any allies, count allies and foes within 10 kilometers of self. If allies outnumber foes, plus 20, all damage resistance, 20 shield hardness, 20 regen. If foes outnumber allies, plus 20 damage, plus 10 flight speed, and 10 on the turn rate. So not a game breaker, but not a bad little trait to have. It's working for you regardless of the scenario. Whether or not it's what you need at that time in the match is going to be completely out of your control, because it's just going to depend on how close your friends are or your enemies are. But not a terrible trait to have, especially if you don't have a lot. Let's take a look at the console. All right, so we have the IFF manipulator, and this can only be used on this ship, which is kind of a bummer. So this is kind of a weird one, 'cause I don't think this has a passive on it. It's just a clicky. So 2 foes within 10 kilometers of target confuse for 8.7 seconds, kind of a weird number. To primary target only, force them to taunt their allies for 8.7 seconds. Another weird one. To primary target only up to negative 400 damage resistance. So this gives a massive damage reduction. This could be used really well against, or using it as a support build. But again, you can only use this console on this ship. I wish this console could be used on other ships, because it would be going on all of our support builds, because this damage debuff is just massive, which is nice. Now it's saying that it forces the primary target, forces them to taunt their allies. So I'm assuming that makes the other enemy ships shoot at your primary target for this certain amount of time, and it's confusing the primary target or all the ships around it. So it seems like a double entendre there, right? So confuse all the ones around your primary target, and then the primary target is now taunting all of them. So I'm assuming that makes them attack it. I haven't tested it. The only thing I really kind of looked at this was looking at the damage debuff in terms of using it in a support build, but abandoned that pretty quickly because I could only use it on this ship. Although, it might be an option to run one of these in a run like that, and then use some of the other more traditional support ships that we're using. But in any case, it's not something that, like, for instance, on my free-to-play, I have this, I'm not using the console at all. There's just not a big benefit. There's other things that you can put in that are mission drop, rep gear, that are going to give you a lot more benefit than this console is going to. All right, so let's take a look down here. So we have, like I said, the 2 hangar bays. The Suliban fighters are really cool. They remind me of the ones that come on the not the Vengeance. The is it the Vengeance? The Kelvin Timeline Dreadnought, because they're kind of round like that. They're pretty cool. I would upgrade them and I would use them. They're nice pets to have on the ship. Let's take a look at the ship in game. Whew, that's bright. I have this on my KDF character, and we'll just take a look at the build. I think I have this put together for support currently, but we can just take a little look at that. Just kind of give you an idea of what the layout looks like here. So we have this X upgraded. This is the fleet variant. Yep, fleet variant. So you can see we have the extra console slots, and then we also, like I said, X upgraded it, and this currently is running a support build on it. If you're interested, and these are hard to get these days, but this is the pink Vanity Shields breast cancer awareness, and it looks pretty good on a lot of stuff. I really like that. Yeah, so that is the Silik. Again, it's a great ship, versatile. You can tank, torpedo, cannon, scatter volley. You can basically do almost anything with it, other than science. Some things it does a little better than others, but all in all, you can put a very good viable build on any of those. Not to mention, if you're into wanting to do some of the carrier stuff, the flight decks are the way to go, and this is one of them. So highly recommend this ship. It's kind of weird. This ship's been around, like I said, for a while, but it's making it on the list for 2022. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the last one. Next up, and finally, we have the Terran Lexington Dreadnought Cruiser. This ship is awesome. When I first looked at it, I thought, cool, it looks great. It's got a lot of the things I want to see on it, but I really didn't realize how good it was till we really started playing with it. Let's take a look at the base stats, and then we'll go over why this ship is so good. So it has hit points of 61,875, hull modifier of 1.375, shield modifier of 1.15, turn rate of 8, impulse modifier of 0.15, and an inertia of 35. So you're going to get a little bit of slide with this, but it's not too terrible. For the seating, we have a Lieutenant Commander Tactical. Next, we have a Lieutenant Tactical Intel. Then we're going to have a Commander Engineering Miracle Worker, Ensign Science, and a Universal Lieutenant Commander. So pretty good seating. It's pretty versatile here. It's a 4-4, as you would expect in a ship like this, and it is a Miracle Worker ship, so we're going to have an extra console slot here right off the bat, which is nice. So we're going to have 4 Tactical, 5 Engineering, and we're going to have 2 Science and 1 Universal. So on this, we're going to have right off the bat, what is that, 3, 7, so we have 12 console slots, okay? And then if we upgrade this with an X upgrade, we have 13 console slots, which is just a huge amount of slots to be able to work with here, with 2 of them basically being universal slots for anything. It also has an Agony Phaser Spiral Lance, which is pretty darn cool, especially if you're building for Phaser. This does very nicely, looks really good. This ship can also equip cannons, dual heavy cannons, which is very nice. So when I first saw this, I was thinking, okay, beam build, broadside, because it's a 4-4. It's also Miracle Worker, so you can use all the Miracle Worker abilities that are going to really boost this, and it does pretty darn good with that. But some people started using this in a way like you would the Boudoir Juggernaut, and were able to get just amazing results. So doing a cannon build on it, which I don't want to say it's counterintuitive, but again, it's not something that you would normally think of on a ship that looks like this, really. But you can do a top-end cannon build on this that is just going to perform amazing. Now, it doesn't have the trait that the Juggernaut does, and it's not a 5-3, but it still is just nipping at the Juggernaut's heels. And for a zStore ship, you can't beat it. The Juggernaut is a a promo ship and extremely hard to get unless you use your event or you spend a bunch of money opening boxes or you have tons of EC. It's much, much harder to get than this ship would be. And this ship is going to rival the Juggernaut, especially if you don't have, all of the top end traits for a, meta, quote unquote, min-maxed cannon scatter volley build. So, for people that do have all those traits, getting the Juggernaut's probably not an issue. But if you don't have all those traits, you're going to get way more bang for buck by going with a ship like this, especially for a cannon scatter volley build. This ship can also run as a heavy tank. So you can't put suppression barrage on it, but you can run attract fire and obviously threatening stance. And then, doing a fire at will build on it. You could do a heavy tank on this, a threat tank, and do very, very well in pretty much any kind of environment. This ship would do very well with that. So this is one on the list where you could go top end in broadside beam. You could go pretty close to top end in dual beam bank build. You could go all the way top end with a scatter volley build, and you can go pretty much top end with a tank build on it. I mean, this really checks all the boxes of all the different kinds of builds, with the exception of obviously science, because science is very specific. If it doesn't have a secondary deflector, then in my opinion, it's not really science. The trait on it is plus 3% to 30% bonus all damage with the starship weapons for 10 seconds. While this trait is slotted, activating directed energy modulation or any miracle working bridge officer ability will grant you bonus weapons damage that scale with the number of nearby targets. Up to 10 of them. So if you're around 10 targets and you're running this trait, you're going to get up to 30% bonus damage. So that's Cat 2 bonus damage. So this trait is pretty decent. Again, it's all going to vary on how decent it is, right? Because I look at it and I'm like, I have other stuff that I can keep up more, and it doesn't matter how many targets I'm around. But if you don't have all kinds of stuff, this trait is good. You're just going to play in a little bit closer and, know when to activate some of these things so you can get the full potential out of it, and it can do very, very good for you. So I would give it, 1 to 10. I would give the trait probably a 6 or 7. And again, if I had this on my free-to-play build, this would be like almost a 10 or my free-to-play account, because I don't have a lot of traits, right? So I have some traits that are basically garbage that I run, but it's all I have. So if I had this would become one of the best ones that I have. So I realize it's all relative. But the trait itself is not terrible. In fact, it's pretty good, depending on what you have available to you. So let's scroll down here a little bit more and take a look at the console that comes with it. So it does have a hangar bay as well. Again, I'd probably switch these pets out, but you can put, it does have the hangar bay for pets. The console is the multi-directional artillery barrage. Now we did some testing with this. It looks kind of cool because it can fire off in multiple different directions, which is kind of nice. But I haven't been able to parse it with it getting much damage. So I don't know that I would really run it. I mean, plus 20 all damage with projectile weapons isn't terrible. So you could use this on a torpedo build, and this is a nice little boost where you could put a universal console in a non-tactical slot, which would help. Adding to your max hull would help Tyler's duality. So the passives on it, again, if you don't have a lot and you were putting together, say, a torpedo build, then, these passives would be okay. But the clicky, I just found it didn't do a lot of damage, unfortunately. But it does look cool. It's kind of an omnidirectional torpedo launcher, and that'll fire off at any direction. It does have a 2-minute cooldown, and it will give plus 20% bonus damage per arc. Per arc with foes. Am I reading that right? So I'm assuming if you're fully surrounded, you would get this bonus damage, for each arc that an enemy is in. So maybe that's why I didn't get a ton out of it, but it's so situational. I was never able to do much with the clicky that's on it. So for the console, I would rate it as an okay. It does look really good though when it fires. It's pretty cool. So that's something, right? All right. Well, that is my top picks for starship ships for 2022. And when I say 2022, I mean like as of right now in 2022, who knows what's going to be coming out. But it's been about a year or so since I put one out, and there's been some pretty good stuff that's been coming out during that time. And I just wanted to give you my opinion on my top picks on those. Again, this is a little bit different from the last one that I did, because the last one I did really was just 100% of value proposition where we're weighing the traits. So it was really more kind of trait heavy, and the ship needed to be pretty good, usable. So you didn't feel so bad buying a ship just for the trait and you're not flying the ship. So I tried to balance those two things on the first video that I did last year, and that video is still relevant. So take a look at that. I'll link it down in the description, because the traits that come on those are really must have, especially for newer players and those kinds of things. This video is really more about the platform of the ship and the use case scenarios for those, and how diverse that they can be. And the fact that you can get them out of the cStore or the zStore means that anybody can get a hold of them fairly easily. Or if there is a fleet version of it, then anybody can get a hold of it very easily just by playing the game and grinding through your reps. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope that was helpful. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you guys. Thank you to all the members of the channel. If you haven't subbed, please do so. Hit that thumbs up button. I'd super appreciate it. Have a good one, guys. Thank you. Hey, guys. Appreciate you watching. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and sub to the channel for the latest news updates and how-to guides.